Welcome to the Embodied Mystic podcast, where we explore the path of feminine awakening and luscious womanhood. Together we'll be diving into topics like sacred sexuality, feminine embodiment, spiritual healing, and soulful relationships. I'm your host, Tamara Fael, tantric mentor and Aries hype girl, here to guide you back to the temple of your body and fall in love with being a woman. I look forward to journeying together. Hello and welcome to the Embodied Mystic podcast. I've got on a very special guest today, Serdar Hararovich. So I've been Facebook friends with Serdar for a little while, and I have received so much valuable information just from following him on Facebook, from being connected. So Serdar is a practitioner who supports people in experiencing more fulfilling and soulful intimacy, yes, through effective communication skills and grounded approaches to healthy relating. So, welcome on the podcast, Serdar. So wonderful to have you.
Thank you, Tamar. It's really nice to be here, and I'm excited to get into some of the things that we've spoken about. And it's really nice to hear as well that you've received a lot of valuable information from what I've been sharing. That's the intention. So it's always nice to hear those positive, reflections of what I'm sharing.
Yeah, thank you so much for everything you share. I mean, it's such a valuable service to the world, and I just love the really frank and straightforward approach that you take, and all the advice you give to those of us who are navigating how to have healthier relationships and really wanting to be conscious about the choices that we make and be in our power. I think it's such a wild journey.
It is, and I'm on that journey myself, and that's why I'm so passionate about bringing what I feel is some clarity into the space. Part of why I do what I do, because I've been misguided by lots of different viewpoints and ideas, and it can get confusing. I know that I experienced that myself, and a lot of the clients I work with can feel confused by all the different messages that they receive, and so that's why I like to try and cut through that as best as I can to bring something to help with that process. And I do my best with that, and it's always nice to hear that it is helpful for some people out there.
Yes, it is, and this is what I really love about what you share. Like, you call out certain things, you call out certain dating strategies and stories and myths that are like everywhere, and I'm really excited to unpack some of that as we've been doing in our conversations. So why don't we start with what we were talking about over the weekend, which was unpacking this whole myth around the fuck yes. So I'll just explain that a little bit for anyone listening who's like, what do you mean, the fuck yes myth? So this is the thing where it's like, if it's not a fuck yes, to anything, but specifically in dating, it's like, if it's not a fuck yes, then it's a fuck no. And then, Serdar, what you were sharing, which I found really fascinating, is that that just doesn't really work in healthy intimacy.
Mm, mm, right. And so this is one of the many different cliches, beliefs, catchphrases that are out there. And yeah, with this particular one, the idea that if it's not a fuck yes, it's a fuck no. Something that I like to bring in is seeing the grain of truth in all these different ideas that are out there. And I think there's a grain of truth in this in one sense, which is that in some contexts, it is helpful. For example, for someone who has had really, has really struggled with their boundaries, it can be helpful to have this really clear rule of saying, unless it's a fuck yes to continue, uh, you know, becoming sexually involved with someone, moving further sexually. It's helpful for them to have this rule. It's going to be a no, and just kind of pausing and stopping and checking in, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's helpful in those kinds of contexts because yeah, some people need to have that kind of extreme of saying, well, unless it's a very clear yes, it's a very clear no until such a time that it feels safe. And then from when people feel safe enough to do that, then they can kind of start to explore the middle ground of, okay, it's not
Mm.
a total yes, but maybe if we talked about boundaries, maybe it would feel okay then. Or maybe maybe if we spoke about what this means, it could be a yes. So we can start to play in that middle ground when we create the safety to say it's going to be a no first. I'm going to stop and pause.
Yeah.
So that's a context in which this kind of idea is can be helpful for some people. Now, where I see it being misguiding for people is where we're applying it to getting to know someone and
Mm.
connecting with new people and dating and relationships more generally speaking,
Mm.
because uh, that's where this rule really gets in the way of allowing something that could grow into a bigger yes from ever doing so. Because a lot of people have the experience of, they're starting to get to know someone and there are vulnerabilities that come up or insecurities, and it's not a fuck yes. It's I feel scared, I feel afraid, I have past trauma from past experiences, and I'm feeling mistrustful. Well, do we interpret that as being a fuck no because those things are coming up? If that does happen, I see that as that's possibly blocking something that could be a promising and beautiful connection, because those
Mm.
are things that come up in lots of relationships. And it's for me, it's about how do we work with those things that come up, with the mistrust that can come up, or sometimes the sense of, well, this person isn't exciting me in the way that
Mm.
I'd like to be excited, whether that's sexually or romantically. And because that's not happening, well, it must not be the person for me. So I'll either have one foot out the door, or I'll actively be searching out or seeking out other partners. That's going to get in the way of healthy intimacy, because sometimes the a person that is most suited to us isn't necessarily the person that is most immediately
Mm.
exciting, and you know
Mm.
all the sparks are coming through and all of that. Sometimes that's not how it is, and sometimes that's actually the indication that maybe it's not quite what is right for us, depending on what our blueprint for love is. That's not a rule that I'm saying that's always the case, but sometimes if we have a tendency to associate anxiety and excitement, and all of that is kind of mixed in with attraction and lust, sometimes our blueprint is a little bit distorted, and it can be worthwhile to kind of explore where that is coming from and whether that's serving us to just kind of go with what is just has always come naturally to us. For example, if we have a type. So that's where I feel like there's a lot more to it than this, very rigid catchphrase of how to interpret what feels right for us and
Mm.
what our compass is in dating. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, I feel it can feel like, because I'm someone who's kind of like, I would say, recovering recovering from or healing from having very intense and exciting, passionate connections from the start that actually have been like highly distressing and dysregulating. So, as someone who's trying to heal from that, it's like meeting new kinds of people, being in different kinds of situations where there isn't that like spark, quote unquote, it can feel almost like unfair. It can feel almost like I've sacrificed something very beautiful and exciting. Like, it is about excitement, and you sharing about it from that perspective, it kind of brings me in touch with the fact that, like, oh yeah, maybe that's a little bit childish of me, in some way. It's like this child part that like wants that excitement and wants the fairy tale, and like, I just want all the things, but actually wanting all of that and choosing all of that from the start has not been healthy for me.
Mm, mm. Yeah. And so I think it's about bringing in those child parts, the childlike parts in us as well, and the parts of us that, for people, for example, who have attachment trauma or wounding, as in they didn't experience secure attachment as children, we can have parts of us that are longing very deeply to have this connection, right? And to tell that part of us, you know, it's gonna maybe take a little while, and it might be best to go with the person who doesn't feel as immediately exciting. It can feel like you're taking away something, because if it's right there, if we can just experience it right now, we will be more likely to take that if there has been any kind of attachment wounding in our past, because it can feel like it's something that is easy to slip away from us. There can be abandonment trauma there. There can be a distorted blueprint of what love is that associates anxiety with love and connection, and therefore we might have such a strong desire for it that we kind of project these feelings onto all these different people who come into our lives, and we'll meet someone and we'll project these feelings of, this is the person, and now I'm really excited. I don't even know who they really are, but I feel the spark. All those feelings are there, and it's exciting, right? And that's the part of us that missed out on this experience of feeling that secure connection, and now it's really excited for the possibility of it being this person. And so we can bring compassion to that and say that's a beautiful part of us, and we can also compassionately guide it into something that's going to be more fulfilling. And one of those ways is, doing work around becoming more securely attached. And it can also just be about kind of looking and reflecting on our type. You've mentioned there your experiences in the past where you might have had a type or a type of connection or type of person that you may have been attracted to. This is quite common. I also had that. Um, and what I found really helpful was starting to, look at that type and considering the possibility that love and happiness and positive experiences could also come in the form of other people, other types of people
Oh
who
yeah.
did, didn't necessarily look like the type that I used to associate with all these things. Because this is what happens sometimes. Our brain kind of associates a type with, that's where all the good things in the universe are. It's like that type of person, and they look like this, or they have this kind of energy, And if we have, for example, insecure, anxious attachment, that type might be someone who kind of embodies or represents an avoidantly attached person who we can kind of tell just by looking at them or kind of sensing the way that they are in the world that they might actually be avoidantly attached. And instantly that triggers what we feel is attraction or love, but is actually attachment wounding, anxiety, insecurity that's coming up that we have associated with love and attraction. And so, because it's familiar to us, right? So that's where it's kind of like, you know, gently asking ourselves about our type, how that's worked for us, and what else is possible. Could it be that someone who's, yeah, looks different or shows up differently than our usual type could actually be more fulfilling in the long run? And that's a kind of a gentle, compassionate process of guiding ourselves in this direction.
Yeah, compassionate, gentle and compassionate. I mean, it's such a deep journey. I remember when I first learned about attachment styles, I was just like, mind blown. Like, yeah, I wonder like how much of the population do you think is like dealing with like the anxious avoidant whole dance? I mean, it's almost everyone I speak to who hasn't already worked on this stuff. It seems like everyone is dealing with this.
Mm, mm. It is quite common. It's hard to, there are statistics on how many people have anxious attachment and avoidant attachment. However, attachment is a spectrum. And so someone could be securely attached, for example, and lean anxious, for example. And if they could be connected with someone who's also securely attached who leans avoidant, and so that wouldn't show up on the statistics of, how many anxious people there are and how many avoidants there are, but they might still play out a less intense version of this dynamic of the push and pull, anxious avoidant dance that is very common. So yeah, I do think it is a very common thing, and I see it a lot.
Yeah, I love that you've brought in this point about nuance, because yeah, these attachment styles, they are our history in a way. It's like our history playing itself out in our present day relating, and it really is so nuanced. And it's not even as if I'm just like anxiously attached across the board. It like totally depends also on who I'm with, and I'm more avoidant with certain people, and that's also fascinating to notice myself bouncing about. So yeah, for someone who isn't so familiar with attachment styles and doesn't know like what is avoidant, what is anxious, could you like summarize it in the most succinct way you could?
Sure. Yeah, it's my passion, so I'll do my best to keep it short. But basically, attachment styles describe the way that we learn to bond with people when we were children, and this is something that stays with us. We find a particular way in which we connect with other people or attach or bond with our caregivers to begin with, and that creates a blueprint in us, and it shows up in how we also connect with or attach to and bond with our romantic partners as adults. And so, someone who is anxiously attached has learned a coping mechanism where they hyperactivate the attachment system because of a lack of consistency when they were a child with their caregivers. So they learn their emotions are louder or heightened. They can experience more preoccupation with attachment, because if I feel like, the connection was there sometimes, but other times it was not there, now I'm worrying a lot. This is my coping mechanism. Maybe if I worry a lot, I'll be able to get the sustenance the shelter, the love that I need, right? So it's this hypervigilance that we learn as children, and we bring that into our adult relationships. And it is a spectrum, just like all the attachment styles. And then you've got avoidant attachment, which is considered the complete opposite side of the spectrum of attachment, where someone's actually deactivated their attachment style. That's their coping mechanism. And that can happen because they had repeated experiences of rejection when they were a child, or being ignored. Their needs were not consistently attuned to and met. And they learned that the best thing to do is to switch off the attachment system in order to cope with those very painful feelings of helplessness and rejection, the fear of abandonment, all of those things. So they switch it off, and so those are the two main insecure attachment styles. Then you've got disorganized attachment, which is more associated with trauma, and it can kind of be a more intensified version of either of those styles, but it's its own distinct style. And then you've got secure attachment, right? So this is where we had good enough parenting, we were attuned to, we received enough validation and consistency that we now come to expect that with our romantic partners, meaning when someone doesn't respond for a day or two, we don't think that we're being rejected. We don't worry that we're going to be abandoned. We just feel because we have the blueprint that even when there's distance or separation, we still have the attachment and the connection is still there. We feel okay. So there's a sense of security in that. We can also feel secure that we can be vulnerable with people, and other people respond to us in a compassionate and understanding way, because that's what we experience as children. So that's secure attachment. And that's something that some people grow up with, and other people, the kinds of people who are doing the work, usually they're working towards secure attachment. They didn't have it when they were children. So they're doing work that is allowing them to move towards it. And it does take time. But yeah, that's a little overview of attachment styles.
Thank you. That was great. And yeah, in your work, Serdar, you're helping people to move towards secure attachment.
That's right. Yeah. This is what I have found in terms of, healthy relating. It's the model that I have found to be the most effective and grounded in looking at the issues that we may have from this framework. And it's not about, labeling or categorizing ourselves or others. It's just about kind of acknowledging that there's these categories that kind of represent a general way that people learn to cope with things. And sometimes when people are like, oh wow, now I know I'm not crazy, it's my brain is doing this because it's a coping mechanism that I have from childhood, that can feel a sense of validation and feeling seen, and kind of separating themselves from the thoughts that often can feel so anxiety producing. So that's kind of a helpful process sometimes for people to have the awareness of these things and identify with some of the coping mechanisms that are part of that attachment style, and knowing what it can look like and how it shows up and the different symptoms or experiences someone can have. It makes it much more effective to be able to deal with it. If we know exactly why it's happening, and we have this framework, then we can be like, this is something that helps with that. And this is something that helps with that. So slowly becoming secure over time. I have found it to be the most effective way to help people have healthier intimacy in their lives.
So powerful. And I feel like just learning about attachment styles and like getting in deeper with this topic, it can really give us an opportunity to like just tap into more compassion for others as well. especially others who are different from us. Because often, I think it's quite common that avoidance or people with avoidant attachment can be villainized by people who have more of an anxious attachment, because, from the perspective of the person with the anxious attachment, they're the ones who aren't there, and, that the anxious attached ones are the ones who are more often feeling abandoned or hurt or wanting more. And I do see a lot of that actually online. I see a lot of just like trashing people with avoidant attachment style, and I can understand from an emotional perspective where it comes from. But actually, like, we're just talking about patterns that come from childhood, and that's how they learned to keep themselves emotionally safe, was by detaching. So the patterns, the experiences of detachment that we are, having with these people, like, got to understand that that's their protective mechanism.
Yes. Yeah, and that can be a really helpful process for someone to regain their power that they may have given away through blame, right? Sometimes blame is appropriate in putting responsibility where it lays, but sometimes we can also be blaming other people for things that we have power over, and that includes the power to be able to move towards secure attachment and not continually choose people who are avoidantly attached and don't have any awareness of it or aren't able to manage it in a healthy way, right? So that's where having that understanding can be so empowering for people on so many levels. And sometimes what that can mean is, as someone increases their understanding both of themselves and of others, there's a new kind of capacity that someone develops, which is the capacity for collaboration. So, we're talking about spectrums here. Someone could be securely attached and have some anxiety, and they might meet someone who's securely attached who has some avoidance. What's going to really help them to be able to avoid the anxious avoidant dance is if they are able to collaborate together on the things that could arise in their relationship and the challenges that come up because of their old coping mechanisms. So the difference that it makes to have that compassionate understanding can be huge. It can sometimes mean to people who have, so much love for each other, can actually, instead of kind of battling each other to get their needs met and to feel safe, which is ultimately what we're trying to do, is to feel safe in the connection. We just have different ways of doing it. We can collaborate together and be like, okay, this is what you need to feel safe. I want to hear that and I want to know more about that. And this is what I need. How do you think we could work together so that we could meet, each other's needs in a way that feels good for both of us? So that's the space of collaboration. And that's such a beautiful space to come to, regardless of whether it's, the dance is an anxious avoidant dance or it's just, the issues that come up in any relationship anyway. And that's that space of being able to collaborate. It's when we move past the blame, that's where we can get to. We can get to this space of being able to collaborate, and feel empowered. Sometimes we're not going to be able to collaborate with someone. They might not have that skill, and we can have the power to say, okay, that's not someone I want to connect with. I don't need to blame them for it. I'm, have the power to say that's not going to work for me. I have a standard that says someone who's able to collaborate and talk about these things is a standard that I have. So I'm going to choose to go in a different direction. And so this is how, one of the ways we can just reconnect with our power in relationships and reconnect with our power to have healthy relationships.
Wow, it's like so beautiful to just imagine, to imagine two people who can have like such a mature, beautiful, respectful conversation about needs. And like I feel like that's what true partnership is. It's like collaboration. It's like, how can we meet how can we meet, instead of trying to like pull someone towards us, or like push someone in the direction that we want. It's like, where's the meeting point between both of us? And it's such a rare thing, but it definitely starts with us all as individuals working on ourselves.
Yeah, and it is. I'm getting goosebumps, just feeling into the power of that kind of connection where that collaborative energy has been established, and because anything's possible in that kind of relationship, any kind of issue that comes up, we can talk about it and work through it because we have this collaborative attitude instead of an adversarial attitude that is quite common, where we're kind of battling to get our needs met with someone who feels like they're the one that's making it impossible for us to get our needs met.
Right.
So when we can kind of approach it in this different way, with this new energy, which often comes as we become more securely attached, it's a very beautiful and powerful thing. And so yeah, that meeting point, and that's to me, those healthy communication skills are such a important part of that. As we
Yes.
become more securely attached, it can be about how do we express a need that doesn't feel like an ultimatum to the other person.
Yeah.
Right, that's just one example. How do we express a boundary in a way that feels like the person has some kind of we value the other person's input in what we're sharing as a need, right? Instead of feeling like they have no choice, or there's a disconnect here, we can kind of bring them into our experience by letting them know why this thing is important to us. So these kinds of different kind of practical communication skills can really help to create this collaborative energy of bringing the other person into our experience, expressing things in a way that the other person feels like, I feel taken into consideration here. I don't feel like I'm the enemy or the one that's wrong, or I feel like you care about me and you're setting a standard here and it makes sense, and you're willing to, if it's a need that you're expressing, you're willing to collaborate with me on that. That's a beautiful feeling for the person on the other end. And so, and if they have those kinds of skills, or even sometimes they're just experiencing it from us, sometimes they're like, wow, this is different. This is not like anything else I've ever experienced. It's safe for me to actually show up differently in this connection, to show up a little bit more collaboratively, and to, for someone who might be avoidant, for example, instead of having to distance myself or create space to feel safe, maybe I can lean into the fact this is safe in a way that nothing before has been safe, right? So that's what it can look like.
Yeah, I'm just feeling really touched by this conversation and reflecting on how incredibly powerful conscious communication is. I think there's such power in learning these tools, and I feel like meditation is something so important, like as a best friend of conscious communication, it's like learning how to just be still and just really reflect on what's happening in the moment, and develop that witness perspective, and having a little bit of distance from our own internal process, so that we can actually make a choice about how we want to continue. And I can really attest to how powerful these tools have been in my own life. I mean, I'm very fiery and very emotional, and it's been such a powerful and touching experience for me to learn how to actually lean back and give the other person space, even when I'm feeling very emotionally activated, and just experiencing the level and the depth of intimacy that you can experience with someone when they feel safe to really share what's going on, because they know you're not going to attack them, even if you're really angry.
Yes, that's a very powerful space of safety, of emotional safety, and yeah, that can unlock so many possibilities for someone and for a relationship to blossom into something very beautiful. And so that's something that I really like to focus on, which is that emotional safety. And we talked a little bit about polarity, earlier, and this is where I diverge from that world, although I think there's lots of benefits and pros to the polarity framework. I think this area of understanding uh, a man's need for emotional safety as much as a woman's need for emotional safety is where the polarity world and I diverge,
Yes.
and where I am some of the most powerful transformations in some of the clients that I work with in their relationships with men has been around understanding what emotional safety looks like, how to co-create that, even though you're relating with a man who, some people out there are teaching that, a vulnerability for a man is a feminine thing and something he shouldn't ever show, and all of these things, and it gets in the way of this fundamental thing, which is emotional safety that we all need.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm in complete agreement with you on that one. And I mean, learning how to be vulnerable is like specifically important for men. And us as women, and I say this from someone who loves polarity, very into it, big fan. And at the same time, it's like, if we as women like want to be held in our emotions, if we want to be able to be emotional and be with a man who can actually hold that and be with that and not try to shut us down, not walk away from us when we're upset. And I'm not talking about like projecting on someone, but just the pure emotion of being in grief or being in rage. If we want a man who can be with that, he's got to be someone who can hold that in himself. He's got to be a man who's in touch with his own feminine energy and his emotions. And we can't expect to be held by a man who, isn't comfortable with his own emotions and whose emotions we can't hold as well. It's a partnership, and I think this is so, so important, and I'm really glad that you brought this up, because I absolutely agree with you. It's like, we've got to hold each other. That's what relationship is.
Absolutely. And especially if you want to experience the real soulful depths of authentic intimacy, which, this is what it's all about for me, because anyone can have a relationship, but to experience the depths of really feeling seen and known and loved in your wholeness, and to see and know and love someone else in their wholeness, that's what it's all about for me, because it's such a beautiful feeling that a lot of people have never got to experience that. So many of us have grown up with conditioning, and this applies to people of all genders, grown up with conditioning where, certain parts of us are allowed and certain parts of us are not. And we grow up and we have personas, and when we're doing the work, we're growing into our more authentic and full self. And that's what I'm, all about. And when we get to experience that with another individual, that's a very beautiful thing. And that requires that, the capacity to allow someone else's wholeness and not hold them to the standard of what, for example, it means to be a masculine man, and to, you know, hold that role for them. And in the same way that, uh, nobody likes to have themselves be held to a certain role and how they are supposed to show up in that role, allowing each other to just be who we are and to show up with a level of the capacity to, um, be with that wholeness. And so that can be a very beautiful thing to open up to.
Yeah. It's like this inner union piece, right? It's like, do we want to be two halves? Like, do we want to be someone's other half and yeah, just be like repressing parts of ourselves so that we fit into a relationship? Like, no, I don't know anyone who actually, you know, deep down wants that. It's like we all have work to do in our own way about integrating these parts of us that we've rejected.
Yeah.
And for many men, that's the piece about emotions. And that's why men who aren't in touch with their emotions will attract these hyper emotional women who will express it for them and who they can run away from.
Yeah.
And as women, you know, some of us can repress aspects of our masculinity, taking responsibility for our lives, you know. And yeah, I feel like this is really soulful intimacy that we're talking about when we're coming to another person as a whole who's in touch with all of us, definitely imperfect, very imperfect, still healing, fucked up in our own way, and so beautiful. And yeah, just wanting to be met where we are in that journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
And held the way that we hold someone else.
Yeah. And one thing that you spoke to this earlier, but the relationship that a man has to his own vulnerability and his own emotions is going to be reflected in how he holds space for someone else. So if we're teaching men that vulnerability is not okay, it's something to push away, fix, get rid of, then it's going to show up in the way that he is with his partner. It's going to come out in one way or another, right? And so that's where being able to really bring in that sense of wholeness, and really emphasizing it, particularly for men. I think everyone, benefits from learning how to work with their vulnerabilities in healthy ways. But because men have been, particularly shamed for that, it can be helpful to, instead of, teaching them even more of that, variations of that same conditioning, to actually be like, look, as a man, it's going to be very challenging for you to connect with any of these vulnerable emotions. So let's actually normalize that and de-shamify that, and bring that in. And there are different ways of doing that. It's not just being able to um, have access to some of those emotions with his partner. Obviously, being able to get support with other men, other practitioners, whether it's therapy, group work, whatever it might be. That's also an important part of every man's journey with his emotions. And so when I was talking about emotional safety, it's not just the safety for a man to connect with his emotions and know that he will be accepted in that. It's also about things like not knowing how feeling blamed can make someone feel unsafe, right? And not all men will have the words to describe that that's the experience, that when he's feeling blamed, he now doesn't feel emotionally safe, or when he's being criticized, or it's all the negative or the things he's doing wrong that is being brought up. But these are the underlying thing is that emotional safety starts to get eroded. And likewise, anyone, regardless of what gender they are, these things erode their sense of emotional safety. And it's just about talking about this in a way that really anchors in how important that is for everyone, no matter what their gender is. And the more that we really acknowledge that, I think the deeper that capacity for collaboration becomes.
Yeah, absolutely. This is such an important thing about blame. And I think this kind of comes back to this phrase of like, yeah, treating someone how you'd like to be treated. And remembering that when we're in the heat of an argument, you know, and we just want to throw that blame at the other person, just like, get that responsibility away from me. It's like, no, that doesn't feel good. And yeah, this is super, super important. It doesn't feel good for anyone.
Yeah, and I also want to just, de-shamify that experience of blaming someone or criticizing them, because when we're in that experience where we feel, for example, the fear of abandonment is coming up, and we're feeling, there's a part of us that's panicking and terrified, we can resort to these old coping mechanisms and these kind of primal ways of influencing people, which blame is one of those ways. It's like a very old coping mechanism. It works sometimes. People feel guilty, they might change what they're doing in the moment. It's just not an effective way of getting our needs met. And that's where it's like de-shamifying and saying, look, these are the automatic things that we often do, and it's coming from a place where we're emotionally dysregulated, and we don't have access to the part of us that knows there might be a better way of doing this. And that's where I think, giving, why I share what I share is about giving people access to these new tools, and saying, you're not wrong for blaming someone or criticizing them. It makes sense given what you're feeling and given what you have awareness of how to like get your needs met. And there are more effective ways of getting your needs met. And it does take a bit of time. It's not just reading a book or being aware
Yeah.
of it. As you would know, and a lot of people listening to this would know, when you're in the moment, it's very challenging to access other options, and pausing and finding this new
Yeah.
way of responding to the situation. That's why I love to practice with people the kinds of practical communication skills that I share with them, because sometimes it is about that practice. It's like that muscle memory, so that when the moment comes up, you have access to this new thing that you've been practicing. So but yeah, I just wanted to kind of bring compassion to that experience, because it,
Yeah.
for people are meaning to, do things in a way that's hurtful or eroding emotional safety. It's unintentional. It's just a helpful thing to have the awareness that that can be happening, and there are other ways of going about it.
Yeah, thank you for that. My kind of patterning, or like just from the experiences that I had in my childhood, for me, it was very easy to arrive into a space where I felt like the other person was the enemy. Suddenly, it would just be like, suddenly it just felt like the trust was broken. I'm just like, whoa, who is this person? What's going on? I would be so angry and shut down at the same time. And what's been really, really supportive for me is really like ingraining this understanding and like imprinting this thing on my whole brain of like, this person is just doing their best. Like everyone is just doing their best in every moment, and this person is someone who cares about me. This is someone who is choosing to be in a relationship with me, or choosing to relate in some way. And how can I respond from the place of remembrance that we love each other? And like whatever I'm feeling, just remembering that like I've chosen to be in relationship with this person, they've chosen to be with me, and it's because we love each other and they're not the enemy. And that has made such a huge difference to my life, because I know no matter what I feel, I have this part of me that's like tethered to that understanding and that remembrance of love, even if I'm very, very angry. And I'm like, I'm very, very angry. But it's okay. And I want to blame you, but I know it's not the right thing to do. You know, I know it's not really your fault, but I really want to blame you. And I think just saying that is so disarming for the other person. It brings so much, it's just so much easier to connect with someone who's being honest with themselves about their process.
Mm.
And I'm so fucking grateful.
Yeah.
I've managed to do that because it's still fucking intense.
Yeah.
Still super intense, but much better. Much better.
It's beautiful, and that's so powerful that you've been able to create that connection with this resource, this awareness and perspective, even in those moments that can feel so overwhelming and so challenging and so disconnecting and adversarial, that you're able to access this awareness in those moments that can be really challenging for a lot of people. So that's really profound that you're able to access that. And it sounds like it's really supporting you in your overall goals in life to have healthier relationships and intimacy. And it's like you're bringing in that collaborative energy, and it's that's one way of doing that, which is maintaining that shared sense of we're in this relationship together, and that person isn't the enemy, even if in the moment it can feel like that. And the fact that you have this way of describing that experience, I want to blame you, but I know that's not right, or I know it's not true, or whatever, however you may say it, that's a really powerful thing, because that's signaling to the other person that that you are emotionally safe. They don't have to protect themselves from you. You have the capacity to kind of pause and not be driven entirely by that animosity that you might feel in the moment. And so just by saying something, and that's such a simple thing to express, but it can really mean so much to someone to feel like, oh wow, this person has awareness, and I'm not the enemy in this. So yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love how we've kind of gone into the depths of conscious communication and navigating these really fucking hard, emotionally charged conversations, because I think how we navigate conflict is so, so important.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's everything. Um, and so, yeah, that's why I do what I do, because there's so many different aspects of it that can be helpful. And really, that's the practical and grounded stuff that I have found to be the most effective, to really focus on how we're working with those conflicts, working with being able to, in the moment, preventing conflict, working with it in the moment, and then repairing, and the whole spectrum of working with it. It can be really powerful and really help people to access a whole new level of intimacy with someone from that place of a shared sense of we're in this together, and that can just like I was talking about before, it really opens up a whole new space of soulful intimacy.
Oh, can just feel my heart is just really happy in this moment. Yeah, I love talking about this. Thank you.
My pleasure. It's been really great to talk with you about all these things.
Yeah, I'm really curious. So I guess, yeah, we're probably coming to the end of our time together, but I would just love to hear a little bit about your background, Serdar, and how you got into this work, and what was happening for you in your life that made it really clear for you that relationships and intimacy was where you wanted to devote yourself for the last 5 years? Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So it's a bit of a, little story going
Yes.
into how it all
Do it.
started. I suppose it was about 5 years ago, and I was dating a woman, and at this time in my life, I was a bit of a binge drinker. So on weekends, I would just, get blackout drunk, and I had a lot of trauma, unresolved trauma that I just didn't have I didn't know where to go to work with that trauma from my childhood, and I was just trying to numb out. And but I was, dating, and I had been dating for, several years at this point, but it was all kind of surface level. I didn't really know how to go deeper with people. I didn't really know myself, so I just didn't have the capacity to really connect with people, even though there was a part of me that really craved that very deeply. And what happened was, I met this woman, and she turned out to be a priestess in these shamanic ceremonies, and I was invited to one of them, and ended up, participating, and it was a transformational experience for me in the way that it really opened up my heart again after many years of just feeling numb and disconnected. And it was very beautiful in the sense that I was like, wow, this is what it's like to actually love again, to feel my heart again. And so that was beautiful. And on the flip side, it meant that the connection that I had with this woman, who was not really available at that time, she was going through her own stuff to do with someone else. And it just brought up all of these painful feelings for me. And I was really in a lot of emotional pain, and it kind of hit me, very hard, and I didn't know what to do with these feelings. It was very overwhelming. So that's a flip side of, being able to feel more deeply again. And what I found was, I just kind of, went on this spiritual journey, as a lot of people do, and just kind of trying out different things, seeing what works, what's helpful. I don't know where to go with this, so seeing, going to different Kundalini activations and all these different experiences to get, work with what's happening for me. And over time, as I experimented with different things and learned about different things, I started deepening into the psychology of trauma, of attachment wounding, and I found that that helped me the most in starting to really grapple with what I was experiencing more than anything else that I was being exposed to, all these different ideas out there. I found was like, this is making sense to me. I get why I would feel so devastated, considering, the kinds of experiences I had as a child, and how that might be, coming up in this connection, and how painful it feels that the person that I love is not there and not available in the way that I want her to be. So that was helpful. And but what I found was that, um, so over time, I continued my healing journey, and uh, different kinds of practices and practitioners. I was able to quit drinking a couple of years into this process, and so I haven't uh, been drinking, been had a drink for about 3 years now. And so it was starting. Things were, I was starting to heal and be able to work with these emotions in new ways and understand what's happening for me. And one of the things that was really powerful for me was understanding how my drinking was a result of this yearning and desire to connect, but not knowing how to do so. Because I had never experienced connection, like true connection. It wasn't part of my childhood to feel seen and known. So I didn't know how to do it with people. And drinking alcohol just kind of, made me feel a little bit more free to just, be myself. And but it just wasn't a sustainable or healthy way of going about it. So when I understood that that was what was driving it, I could kind of work through the shame of that, the shame of being someone who binge drinks alcohol and all the painful feelings that were associated with that. And I was able to, just kind of have a neutrality to it and acknowledge, it's a beautiful thing to want connection and intimacy, but this is not the way that's going to, produce the result that I'm wanting. So I was able to start connecting more with people who also weren't drinkers and going to other events that didn't involve drinking. So that was a helpful part of my process. But in understanding that the my what was going on for me, what I found in the community that I was in, which was a spiritual community, was there wasn't a lot of people who really got this more grounded and psychological element to what can be going on for people. I was hearing more about, past lives and twin flames and that kind of thing. And so that made me, want to bring in this perspective that I had found so helpful in starting to work through my stuff. And as I started kind of offering a service that was designed to help people just work with their inner child. And over time, that developed into the work that I do with people now, which is really supporting them with the things that I have found to be the most effective, which is one, moving into secure attachment and everything that's involved with that, particularly the healthy communication skills. Um, and just to kind of tie it back to what we started with, one of the first connections with a woman that I had that felt like a secure attachment that I ever had, which I would have been maybe like 32 years old. It was with a woman, and it was a few years into this healing journey, and it was with someone who, instead of her being the type that I would normally go for, the person that I would pick because I was so physically attracted to her, that's what I would normally go with, right? With this person was someone that I felt more of a kind of a neutral attraction to. It was just like, and it was kind of weird to do this. I was like breaking my pattern. It was just like, this is not someone I feel that attracted to. Like, she's attractive, like, don't get me wrong, but like, she just wasn't my type. And yet, that was the first time I really felt this secure attachment with someone. And that relationship really opened up so much for me because that was the first time I was able to really be vulnerable with a woman, to start to feel safe in relationship with women. And so that's part of why I talk about the things that I talk about, because that unlocked so much for me to break my pattern and start being open to something else. And that's really, I see that as a pivotal connection in my life when I was dating her for 6 months to experience this something completely new. That at the beginning it felt much more neutral, and I was curious, I was open. It wasn't exciting. It was just like, let's see what's here. And it turned out to be that pivotal relationship that really opened up this new experience in me, that it can be safe for me to be my whole self in a relationship with a woman. And so that's what started it all for me. And yeah.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that. It's a beautiful story, and like, yeah, what a journey. What a journey. I love also what you were sharing at the end, just about like, yeah, choosing people who look different from what we usually go for. And it's kind of like I go slightly insane when like I'm very attracted to someone. It's like rationality just kind of just like goes out of the window and something else happens. So I think that's actually a very important thing to talk about. And it also like brings me back to the way we started talking, which was about like lust, and how so many connections and relationships are driven by lust, and how when you said that, I was just like, whoa, whoa, yes, it's so obvious, but I don't even think about it because it's so like enmeshed in the way that I've chosen men in the past. I don't think I'm alone in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Such a common thing, and I'm not here to shame lust. I think lust is it's why we
Right.
exist, right? It's just
Yeah.
about that kind of compassionate guidance and saying, okay, we can have attraction, right? And we can also have something really fulfilling and soulful and beautiful. And sometimes that might involve, yeah, kind of being open to someone who isn't immediately as attractive at the beginning, and being open to the possibility of that growing. And so kind of experimenting with that, not as a rigid rule that if I'm attracted to someone, that couldn't possibly be a good, thing for
You
me. Like that's not what
qualify.
I'm. Yeah, right.
If you're hot, you're disqualified.
Yeah, so it's not about replacing one rigid rule with another. It's just kind of opening the conversation up to, reflecting on these things and experimenting, and considering, something new. What's something new we could try out? And
Yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely. And we're definitely not shaming lust on this podcast. I mean, my work is heavily orientated in sacred sexuality. But yeah, I mean, even with sexuality, I remember as well, like starting to explore with men who I didn't find necessarily just super, super, super hot. I actually realized that when I followed who I was attracted to on, like, in other ways, like there was a great rapport between us, or like he was super funny, or I just felt really comfortable with him, or like whatever it was. Actually, these men were way better sexual matches for me than men who I just thought was super hot, but there wasn't really anything there. It was just very shallow. It wasn't really like an energetic attraction. It was just superficial. So I think, yeah, on any level, really going for that depth and being less superficial can be supportive,
yeah.
depending.
Right, right. And one thing that I want to say on that is usually the ways that we kind of assess someone and the kinds of things that we're attracted to and that we look for are very deeply ingrained, and they become part of, the neural networks, the groove in our brain. And it takes a bit of effort, like intentional effort, to like shift that even a little
Yeah.
bit. And that's why I tend to give people these exercises with, starting to consciously reflect on what they might be doing unconsciously. So sometimes, like if someone's on a dating app, are you looking at what kinds of things are you looking for? Is it like the person's status and lifestyle? And if so, what is it like for you to intentionally look at things like what is the how does it feel like the kindness in their eyes to notice those kinds of things? What is it like to notice whether this feels like someone who is presenting a perfect persona that feels very attractive, versus there's something about what they're presenting that's, might be a little bit vulnerable and authentic, that shows a characteristic of courage and authenticity? Is that something that we're noticing? Or yeah, and if we're looking for, someone that we feel really emotionally connected with, are we noticing the kinds of things that might signal that, or are we looking at, the fact that they yeah, have high status, and they have, really great photos of themselves and they look amazing? Like what are we focusing on? And these things are usually unconscious, they're like a habit. So just kind of, reflecting, it's an invitation to kind of reflect and try out something new.
I love that. Yeah, it's so important that we try new things and have a look at what's habitual if we want to create a different outcome.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Serdar. I, just love your work. I love what you're doing. So tell us, how can someone work with you or find more of your stuff?
Sure. So I have my Facebook profile as kind of my hub at the moment. So if you just type in my name, Serdar Hararovich, you can find my link tree on there. If you're interested in having a call with me, just kind of talking about some of these things, and I offer these free calls for people to just kind of have a discussion like this and talk about what's going on for them and see if I might be able to support them in becoming more secure and having that healthier, more authentic and soulful connection, both within themselves and all the different parts of themselves, and also with others. And so that's one way you can work with me. And right now it's the main way, but I've created a course over the last year and a half that's currently being finalized and edited. So that's going to be
Wow.
available pretty soon. So people can just let me know if they're interested in that, and I can let them know when it's released.
What's the course about?
The course is about all of these things. So there's actually a module called Conscious Dating, where I go into much more detail about all of these different things that we've spoken about, and some of the more practical things that people can do to, identify their type, work with that in a healthy way, so they can align with, what they're really wanting, um, and as well as, working with all these beliefs and these cliches that are out there, and really just going through all of them and looking at the grounded perspectives that help people to really align with that connection that they're craving. So, um, and so that's one module, which is conscious dating. Another one is conscious conflict, which is all about working with conflict. What that collaborative approach and all the practical elements that help to create that in a relationship, or even when you're dating someone, um, as well as looking at the 8 things that decrease emotional safety. We talked about blame being one of them. There's a few things that are often surprising to people as things that can decrease emotional safety. And then we look at the 8 very specific things that increase emotional safety to create that foundation for something really beautiful, something that feels so solid that you feel very secure with that person, like that's really your person and your partner. So just these practical ways of going about this, and and then other modules on codependency versus interdependency, and understanding the distinctions, so that we're not shaming the desire for connection and love, and actually bringing in the balanced alternative, which is not hyper independence, but this balance between the two, and explaining what that looks like in practice when it comes to needs and expectations and desires and disappointments, and working with those things from a place of interdependence rather than codependence or hyper independence. So we cover basically everything to do with authentic intimacy, and so it's pretty comprehensive.
Wow, yeah, it definitely sounds like it. I'm really excited to see more. And yeah, we had a call a little while ago. I highly recommend getting on a call with Serdar. It was really, really, really helpful for me. I felt like you really understood where I was coming from, and you had this like gentle perceptiveness I felt that was really, it was just beautiful. Like I felt really seen, I felt really understood, and yeah, it was just super helpful. So I can definitely recommend that for anyone who's feeling a call to work with Serdar. I'll put all of the links in the show notes. And yeah, it's been so wonderful having you. Is there any last thing you'd like to share before?
Just feeling into that. Yeah, it's been a real honor to have this conversation, and I've really appreciated the depths that we were able to go here to talk about these things, and I'm really excited for these ideas, the sense of collaboration and relationships to become more of a norm, and to make these things more mainstream, and normalize emotional safety as a thing that we all need. So I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about that, because it's such a beautiful thing, and I really think there's so much that as human beings we have the capacity to unlock in our relationships, and in our relationship to everything around us. And I think as we develop this deepening into healthy intimacy with each other, a lot of that can be unlocked. So it's really exciting, and I'm really pleased to be able to have this conversation with you.
Thank you, Serdar. Yes, healthy intimacy will change the world. I believe that for sure. Okay, so this has been such a beautiful episode. I feel really nourished and full. I'm smiling. If you're not watching the video, I've been smiling a lot in this conversation. And yeah, check out Serdar's work. It's awesome. And yeah, I'll see you on the next episode.
You're listening to the Embodied Mystic podcast. Thank you for being here and for hanging out with me. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and that it could serve you in some way. I'd love to hear from you. My inbox is always open. Let me know what spoke to you in this episode, and if there was a moment that lit you up or brought you into deeper self-reflection. If you loved this episode, I'd be super grateful if you took a moment to leave a review or share with a friend. You can do this easily by visiting the link in the show notes. It's been a real pleasure connecting with you today, and see you soon.